In this video, what we'll do, we'll understand one important annotation, that is add Spring Boot application annotation. So this is a very important annotation, and it does a lot of things while running our Spring Boot application. Okay, all right. And this annotation should be annotated for our Spring Boot application starter class or Spring Boot main entry point class. Okay, this annotation should be annotated for this starter class. Okay, and now if you can go inside this source code of this annotation, you can see this annotation internally contains three annotations. First is Spring Boot application, Spring Boot configuration annotation, enable auto configuration, and component scan annotation. All right, add Spring Boot application annotation internally contains these three annotations. All right, let me show you in a diagram. So look at here, add Spring Boot application annotation is the combination of add Spring Boot configuration annotation plus add enable auto configuration plus add component scan annotation. And add Spring Boot configuration annotation internally uses add configuration annotation. So let me show you in a source code. So look at here, this is the add Spring Boot configuration, and it internally uses add configuration annotation. Okay, so understood. Just remember, Spring Boot application annotation, it internally contains these three annotations. Now let's understand these three annotations step by step so that you will be able to understand the usage of Spring Boot application annotation. Okay, as we know, Spring Boot configuration annotation internally uses add configuration annotation, so this annotation should work as add configuration annotation. Now let's understand the usage of add configuration annotation. So this is very important annotation, and we use add configuration annotation to configure, to provide a configuration as Java-based configuration. Okay, Java-based configuration. So there are three types of configuration we can do in a Spring-based application, right? One is XML-based configuration, all right, and second is Java-based configuration, and third is annotation-based configuration. Okay, so in order to do Java-based configuration, we use add configuration annotation. So basically we create a Java class, and then we annotate that Java class with add configuration annotation, and then that Java class becomes a configuration class, and we can define all the Spring related configuration in that class. For example, let's say I can create a class over here. For example, let's say Spring config. Okay, so this is a normal Java class. Okay, it doesn't related to Spring. Now what we can do, we can use add configuration annotation on top of this class so that this class becomes Spring Java-based configuration class. All right, now we have annotated this class with add configuration annotation, and now this class becomes a Java-based configuration, and we can define a beans, or we can configure beans inside this class. Okay, understood the usage of add configuration annotation. So we use add configuration annotation to make a Java class as a Spring Java-based configuration class, and we can define the beans inside this configuration class. So next is add enable auto configuration class. So this annotation is very important. This annotation enables auto configuration classes for our Spring Boot application. So whenever our Spring Boot finds Spring starter web dependency in a class path, then this annotation basically enable a dispatcher servlet auto configuration class, view resolver auto configuration class, and other auto configuration classes. So this annotation is responsible to enable auto configuration classes whenever our Spring Boot application will find a dependencies on a class path. Okay, just remember this annotation. And next is add component scan annotation. So this annotation is also very important, guys. So we use add component scan annotation to scan the Spring components in a particular package. For example, look at here. This is the project structure of our Spring Boot application, and this is called a base package for our Spring Boot application. Let me create one more package. Let's say .sub1, and let me create quickly one more package. Let's say .sub2. Okay, and as we know that this entry point class, that is Spring Boot application entry point class, annotated with add Spring Boot application annotation, and it internally contains add component scan annotation. Okay, now what this annotation will do is it will automatically scan all the Spring components inside this base package plus its sub packages. Okay, alright, so add component scan annotation will scan all the Spring components within a base package plus all the packages, the sub packages inside this base package. A demo is the base package, and within a demo we have sub1, sub2. So these are the sub packages of demo package, right? And add component scan annotation will scan all the Spring components present in demo package as well as sub1 and sub2 package. So Spring component means the class which is annotated with Spring provided stereotype annotations. For example, let me quickly create a class. Let's say Spring component, and I will create a method here, public string, let's say get message, and I will return some string here, let's say hello world. Okay, so this is the class. It has a method, get message method, and this is not a Spring component yet. Okay, we need to annotate this class with some Spring provided stereotype annotation. For example, let's say if we use add component annotation. So whenever we add component annotation to any class, then this class becomes Spring component. Okay, and this add component scan annotation will scan this component, okay, during our application startup, and then it will scan and then it will register this component in Spring application context or Spring IOC container. Alright, I hope you understood the flow. Now what we'll do, we'll get this bin, this Spring component bin from the application context. So component, let me rename this. Okay, so go to our Spring Boot main entry point class. It has a main method and this is run method. So run method returns application context, right? That is configure application context, and this is nothing but a Spring IOC container. It contains all the Spring components. Now let's go ahead and let's get that application context from the run method. Configurable application context, and let's say application context. Okay, now what we'll do, Spring component equals to application context, and then we have a get bin method. So whenever you want to get a bin, that is Spring bin, then you can call get bin method, and there are overloaded get bin methods, so you can choose appropriate. So I'm going to choose first one, and then I will just pass Spring component here, dot class. Now we got Spring component from the application context. So here application context is nothing but our Spring IOC container, and Spring IOC container contains all the Spring beans, and Spring component is nothing but a bean. Okay, because we have annotated this Spring component with add component annotation. Okay, so this is the annotation based configuration. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the sys out here, and I'm going to call get message method. Now let's run the Spring Boot application and let's verify whether we have configured this component properly or not. So look at here, hello world. It means that add component scan annotation successfully scanned the sub package. Okay, I hope you understood the usage of add component scan annotation. So add component scan annotation basically scan the base package. Along with that, it will also scan all the sub packages for Spring components. So here we have a Spring component or Spring bean, and it is present in a sub1 package, and sub1 package it is stored in a base package. So this is the hierarchy. Alright, I hope we understood the usage of add configuration annotation, add enable configuration annotation, and add component scan annotation. Alright, great. Alright, once we understood add configuration annotation, add enable auto configuration annotation, and add component scan annotation, then let's go back to add Spring Boot application annotation. So as we know, add Spring Boot application annotation is a combination of these three annotation. So instead of using these three annotation, we can use this single annotation, that is add Spring Boot application annotation. That's why whenever we create a Spring Boot application using Spring Initializer, by default Spring Boot will add this annotation to starter class or Spring Boot entry point class. Okay, so instead of using these three annotations, we can use this single add Spring Boot application annotation. And so this single annotation will do the purpose of these three annotations. Okay, I hope you understood the usage of add Spring Boot application annotation. So this is a very important, and just remember what this annotation does behind the scene. So it will auto configure the class as a Java configuration class, and it will enable the auto configuration, and it will scan the components in a base package as well as its sub packages. Okay, great.